Welcome everybody.
Hi,
I'm
folks.
Catherine Salmond, editor of the Herald. Delighted to be joined by Scottish Labour Party leader, Anas Sarwar.
My pleasure, good to be here.
Very good to have you. I am just going to get my phone opened up, 1 second. Okay, so we're at the Fringe. We thought we could have a slightly more relaxed tonight.
You've already said to me, Catherine, that things aren't going well, we'll just break into dance. So
No, I didn't say
reassuring.
that, but so we're going to have a night of some political chat. We're going to have a lot of personal chat, and we're going to have a little bit of fun, and then we're going to make sure we've got a lot of time for audience questions. And we don't want any political sound bites. Okay?
You're safe here.
So, but we do need to talk about one thing. We need to talk about Keir Starmer. So, he's casting a big shadow over you at the moment, isn't he? It's not really done you any favours.
Look, to be honest, look, Keir and I have got a very close personal relationship, a very close political relationship. And in many ways, our political destinies are very closely linked. I've always been of the view that there was no route to a Scottish Labour government that didn't involve getting rid of the Tories, and that meant Keir Starmer winning and Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister. And he's always been of the view that there's no route to a UK Labour government unless we were rebuilding a Scottish Labour Party and actually winning in Scotland again. And whilst of course there's been challenges, I think it's safe to say, in the first year of a Labour government, what people are voting on next year is not who the UK government is, not who the Prime Minister is. What they're voting for is who's the Scottish government, who's the First Minister. And I think, and I believe this will happen, I think people will make a judgment about not having our parliament just being a parliament of protest or our election being an election of protest, but actually making a proactive, positive choice about what direction we want Scotland to go in next.
Has he ruined your chances of becoming First Minister?
I believe we're going to win next year. I believe we're going to beat the SNP. I believe we'll get a Scottish Labour government, but it's going to require a lot of hard work over the next 9 months. And even my most harshest critic would accept that I'm not someone that's afraid of hard work. We've been written off before. When I took on this job, people wrote us off. They said the Labour Party wouldn't survive. They said we couldn't beat the Tories and come second in the council elections the year after. They said that we couldn't win a general election. We did. We didn't just win. We won very well. They wrote us off in the Hamilton Larkhall and Stonehouse by-election. We won. And if people want to write us off again next year, no problem. I'm happy to prove them wrong again.
Okay, so what about Gaza? November 2023, you backed demands for a full ceasefire. Starmer didn't. What conversations did you have with him at that time? How did that look?
Look, really, lots of conversations and lots of really open conversations.
Do you phone each other? Do you Zoom call each other? How does it work?
Look, it's a mix. So sometimes it'll be on the phone, sometimes it'll be text exchanges, sometimes we'll meet in private, whether that's him in Scotland or me down the road. But most often it's text exchange or phone calls at weekends when both of us obviously are a bit freer. But look, on the important point in Gaza, one of the most frustrating things in all of it since the attacks on October 7th and the aftermath in terms of the absolute decimation of Gaza and the ongoing siege and occupation of the West Bank too, is what I find really frustrating is those people that try and approach the Middle East as if it is supporting a football team and one team gets everything right and the other team gets everything wrong. It's actually much more complex than that. I think there are lots of well-meaning, well-intentioned people who would all agree that Hamas is a terrorist organisation that did a horrific act of terrorism on October 7th, the largest loss of Jewish life in any single day since the Holocaust. But those same vast majority of decent people will look at the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu and be horrified by the starvation of a population, the very deliberate and indiscriminate killing of innocent civilians, the destruction of infrastructure, including hospitals, the Al-Shifa hospital, somewhere I've been actually myself. I did an aid mission to the Al-Shifa hospital where we delivered a generator to help keep electricity on when the Israeli government was turning off electricity 8 hours in the day. And they'll see the ongoing illegal occupation of both large parts of the West Bank and in Gaza. And they'll be horrified by what clearly seems like an Israeli Prime Minister that has no interest in peace. I believe is not even acting in the interest of his own citizens, and I think is motivated more by staying in power and staying out of jail than he is about doing the right thing for his citizens. So I think the vast majority of people will be horrified by that. And by extension, when you saw the situation with the Iran conflict, I think people would be horrified by the thought of Iran, for example, having a nuclear weapon and what that means for regional security and what it means for global security. So I think the big gap in all of this is people need to get back to viewing human life as equal. And I don't accept a politics that suggests double standards, one rule for one group of people, another rule for somebody else, or that somehow one life trumps another life. Every single life is equal, whether they are Jewish, Muslim, Christian, any other faith, whether they're Israeli, Palestinian, or any other nationality. And I think if we got back to that kind of international diplomacy, we wouldn't have the horrific situation we have right now in Gaza and the broader Middle East.
Has Starmer handled this well?
Look, the opening part was really difficult. I mean, if you look at the LBC interview, which understandably caused a lot of upset. I was on Sky News just an hour or so after the LBC interview, hadn't seen the LBC interview, and was asked about it, and I've always been of the view that cutting off of electricity, water, food is a breach of international humanitarian law. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is clearly in breach of international humanitarian law. I agree with the ICC and ICJ when they say there's a plausible case for genocide that needs to be answered by the Israeli government. And I believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is not a fair actor for peace and is a malign influence on the Middle East. Just like I believe Hamas is a terrorist organisation and hostages should be home with their loved ones.
But on Starmer, would you answer yes or no? Has he handled this well?
So I think the early part was of course challenging, and he himself accepts that what he said in the LBC interview wasn't right and it was wrong. But I don't think enough people recognise a couple of things. One is, I think there are probably more people that think we have influence in stopping Benjamin Netanyahu. We being the UK have more influence in stopping Benjamin Netanyahu than we do. I don't think he will listen to a Prime Minister of the UK or France or Germany.
Do you think Starmer has no influence?
So I think he has influence on President Trump, and I think Trump ultimately is the only one that can exert influence on Benjamin Netanyahu.
Has he done enough to influence President Trump?
I think if you look at how President Trump moved even in the 2 or 3 days that he was in Scotland on the starvation of the population of Gaza on aid.
Years down the line now.
Oh yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The globe has utterly failed the people of Palestine and the broader Middle East. The world has failed. And we often talk about the international community as if somehow there's a group of people out there that can automatically do something or resolve something. The international community, if any such thing exists, has clearly failed, and that means we have a population that is being collectively punished, people being literally starved to death, and also looking like the peace process is further away than it can ever be. But just on a couple of actions where I don't think the UK government actually gets enough credit, if credit's the right word, is the last government did a block on the ICC and the ICJ. That was lifted by a UK Labour government. They didn't recognise UNRWA, the primary humanitarian agency, and actually went further, withdrew funding for UNRWA, the humanitarian agency that was reinstated by a Labour government. A Labour government was right to sanction ministers who clearly are inciting violence, particularly settler violence in the West Bank. And they were right to place embargoes on arms sales, but let me emphasise this, I think we have to be doing much more to hold an Israeli government to account, to provide evidence that there is not any hint of components that are being used in a proactive way in Gaza. And I think every single form of pressure that can be put on Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government has to be applied if we are to see a peaceful resolution. Palestinian statehood is welcome. I want the state of Palestine to be recognised. My one frustration with the debate about the Palestinian statehood is not going to stop the war in itself. We need the most urgent and pressing thing we read right now is the war to stop, bombs to stop dropping, bullets to stop firing, people to get the food and supplies and medicine they need, and a pathway to that peace and freedom, which includes hostages being back with their loved ones at home.
So did you speak with the Prime Minister last week when he said the UK would recognise the state of Palestine? Did that involve any text messages or?
Yeah, I spoke to him and we had an exchange
Did you agree
of messages.
with what he'd done and the timing of it?
I think it's the right approach. I think it's the right timeline also in terms of the UN General Assembly and making that commitment. I'm glad that that's been followed by Mark Carney and Canada. I'm glad it was preceded by Macron and France. I hope other countries will do the same. But again, I stress, and I made this point to him, and to be fair, he made it back to me, is whilst Palestinian statehood is important and we have to recognise it, it's their right, it's not a right of veto for any other government or any other people. Palestinian statehood, the most urgent thing right now is the war has to stop, and what more can be done to get this war to stop so people can survive and be able to feed themselves and their families. Okay,
so the Prime Minister in Scotland, how often do you speak with him, do you think? Is it every week?
Probably not quite every week, but at least 2 or 3 times a month, I would say.
And how often do the other Scottish Labour MPs speak with him? Is that a lot?
I don't check their diaries or mark how often
what I'm getting
they
at is
how
is
often
there
they
a
speak
good
to him.
relationship with
but
him
I know
and
there is
them?
a good relationship. I know Scottish Labour MPs are in Downing Street very often. I know they meet as smaller groups, larger groups with cabinet ministers as well as with the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's team. But I think it's a very positive, good relationship.
What about when he comes up here? Do you dread that?
No, I like it.
Do you like it?
Yeah. He's.
Is it good for you when he comes up here?
Absolutely. I think the more that he gets to see, feel, and hear the impact that decisions make on Scotland, the better. I think the more he gets to see positives of what Labour decisions do, the better. And also the more he gets to see and hear what people's lived experiences in Scotland is, of course, a good thing. And also, he enjoys being up here. And one of the reasons why
he doesn't look like he does. I remember being invited to a Labour gala fundraising dinner or something before he was Prime Minister, and everyone was like, he's going to be Prime Minister. And you were on the stage, you were flirting with Jackie Baillie or something.
Flirting with Jackie Baillie?
Look,
my goodness, my mother says she's a second mother to me, for goodness sake. Flirting with Jackie Baillie.
You were flirting with Jackie Baillie, you were living your best life on that stage, and he looked in a room of Labour people who were, I don't know, buying signed photographs of you for the party's finances. He looked petrified, uncomfortable. He did not look, and it struck me, I thought, what? These are his people. And he looked as uncomfortable as he did on the steps of Turnberry with Trump. But how can he come across like that with his own party if you say he loves being in Scotland?
So I think there's a couple of things within that. One is, I think if you compare body language and approach so he's been leader now of the UK Labour Party for 5 years, I've been leader of the Scottish Labour Party now for 4 years. If you compare visits and appearances in Scotland 5 years ago compared to 3 years ago, 2 years ago and now, I think you will see a significant shift in terms of confidence and comfort. That's the first thing. Secondly, we're different personalities, and he is not. I'm much more of a kind of, not flirting with Jackie Baillie, for goodness sake. She's like my mom, for goodness sake. That's terrible. Why are you saying that? But like I'm much more probably conversational, out there, a bit more of an extrovert. I think it's safe to say he's a bit more introverted in that sense.
So does the dynamic change when he comes up to Scotland? Are you in charge?
Well, I'm in charge in Scotland, of course I am. And I think what's really interesting is, and his own team say this actually, if you actually compare his body language when he's in Scotland compared to his body language when he's in other parts of the UK, he's actually more relaxed in Scotland than he is in other parts of the UK.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think we've built up a rapport, and probably because I probably push him to be a bit more extroverted than perhaps he is in other parts.
So he's not relaxed
which is,
in England?
No, I don't think it's the word relaxed. Again, I think you're looking at it slightly differently.
But he looks really unrelaxed.
I just don't think it's relaxed. I just think it is a very different personality and a very different approach, which is probably makes him appear more serious and more...
And do you discuss that with him to lighten up? Do you tell him to lighten up?
I mean, I have lots of fun with him in terms of...
Okay.
I just force him into things, which is great fun. But also because he's probably spent more time with me in terms of not just in front of cameras or doing political events, than he probably has with most, if or any other senior politician in the Labour Party. We probably also have more of a rapport, because like when he was, for example, coming up to Scotland, he'd be here 2-3 days, we'd stay together for 2 or 3 days. He probably doesn't get that same face-to-face time with many other politicians in the UK, which again gives him a different outlook.
We'll move on then, you're best friends, we'll move on.
Is that Jackie's my bestie?
Yeah, she's your. I mean, we know that. We can see that. Right, we're going to move on to Kate Forbes, who I don't think is your best friend. So
I like Kate. I like Kate Forbes. I like Kate Forbes. I respect her.
This week, she made the announcement that she isn't going to stand next year. We know the reasons why, for family reasons. You've got 3 kids, three sons. Is that right? 3
boys. That's right.
Yeah. How do you juggle life as a dad with being a party leader?
Look, it's really hard, particularly when you've got teenage boys. My eldest son's going to be 17 in a couple of weeks, middle one's going to be 15 in a couple of weeks, and my youngest is 9. And whilst progress has been made in breaking the gender disparities in our country, I'm going to be honest, it is still, there's no point pretending that somehow it's equally as difficult for dads in politics as it is for mums in politics. I think we've got to be honest and say it's still harder for mums in public life than it is for dads, as much as we continue to thrive and strive for parity. There are some demands on a mum that we have to be honest are much, much harder. I should emphasise that I believe Kate in terms of the reasons she gives. She wants to be there for particularly the formative years of her children. That's completely, or a child. That's completely understandable. But I think there is a broader thing happening there with the SNP, if I'm honest, that probably Kate's decision feeds into, where I think there is obviously a large number of SNP MSPs who are standing down. I think there is a generation of politicians, I count Kate as my generation rather than a generation older, but I think there is a generation of SNP politicians that are vacating the stage, Nicola Sturgeon being one of them. And I think there is a sense that politics in Scotland has fundamentally shifted, and I think the SNP is looking tired. I think they are looking as if they are running out of steam and energy, that they are running down the clock. And I think if it wasn't, we'd have a very different decision from many of the MSPs that are stepping down. And I think we're also moving into a different stage of Scottish politics, where the last 15-20 years feel like it's been dominated solely or largely by the Constitution. I think we're moving on to delivery now, and what's happening in Scotland, decisions in Scotland that actually impact on people's lives in Scotland. And on those issues, I honestly don't think the SNP's got a good story to tell. And that's why I think John Swinney is pivoting to talking about independence again as the number one issue, or trying, as he did yesterday, try to talk about Nigel Farage again. He'd rather talk about anything other than what he's actually doing in power or what they've got the power to change in Scottish people's lives, and that's the area that we are going to focus on between now and the election next year. But going back to the question you were asking, on parenthood, it's strange, it's hard. Like, there's no point pretending it's really. It's a really different and in many ways difficult time to bring up kids in a world of social media, in a world where politics is way more polarised, and where my two eldest kids in particular are on social media feeds that probably some of them have strong views on their old man and what he does. So some of that poses challenges.
But in terms of the juggling, do you feel the burden of that, or do you have a lot of help? I suppose is the...
Well, to be honest, I couldn't do this job if it wasn't for the fact that they have got a fantastic mum. And they're very lucky, and I'm very lucky that they've got a mum that does so many great things for them and for us, and just got to be open about that.
Okay.
But yes, I do feel it, because look, I grew up in a political family myself, and there are things that I had to do that, looking back, were not normal, but you had to create a new normal for yourself.
Like what?
Like most people don't have to think about safety and security or death threats or funny letters that come through the post or media or intrusion. And that's probably amplified even more now. There was no social media when I was my kids' age. They've got to think about that now in a way that I didn't have to think about it. And you do get moments of guilt. I get massive moments of guilt, particularly when you don't get to spend as much time with them as you want to spend with them. My youngest is brilliant at making me feel the full force of that guilt, where he says, "Oh, Dad's away again. Oh, I'll maybe see him," when he's actually got some time for us, and makes you feel guilty. He normally does it just so you can get a new toy once. But
what's the biggest? I'm drawing you away from the politics for this bit here about you. What's the biggest sacrifice you feel you've made when it comes to your family? There may not be any, but do you have any regrets, or do you feel there's anything you've missed out on?
Yes, so my eldest, Adam, is going to be 17.
So is this the one who's just had his Hires results?
This one just done his Hires, did better than his dad. It was fantastic. But I did all right in my Hires, by the way. But I think for Adam, I feel it the most because I was just going into politics when Adam was 18 months. And obviously I was an MP in Westminster for 5 years. And I don't think I fully appreciated how much I missed in the 5 years where I was half the week in London. Because for my other two kids in particularly my youngest, I've been there for the vast majority of those things that I missed for Adam, so that's one thing. Secondly, of course, kids need their mums, but they also need their dads and they need their parents. And every family's different, but look, kids need their dads in their lives. And I can see the difference in the confidence levels in my middle and youngest son compared to my eldest, and the more time I've spent with Adam as he's got older, the more I've seen that difference in that confidence level, so I feel guilt about that. But the other interesting thing about fatherhood is, I think when you reflect on your own father and fatherhood and how you parented yourself, I actually think that you parent or you do fatherhood the way, so you try and do the things you think your dad was good at, you try and do more of that. And the things that you think your dad was really poor at, I think you try and overcompensate for that. So I'll tell you what I mean. So this is where it's going to sound really soppy and sad, but I don't mean it this way. Is I used to feel really, when growing up, that my dad just would not make time for me. And it's one of the things that I've been really cautious about, that I don't want my kids to feel as if our dad didn't make time for us. So I'm really conscious about that. Secondly, I never want to feel that Dad didn't want to be with us or spend time with us or love us. So again, I think about that all the time. And then third is, like my kids will tell you, what's the most annoying thing about Dad? He tells us he loves us too much. I never thought that was a bad thing, for goodness. And he hugs and kisses us too much. And that's...
Is that because your dad didn't?
I mean, it's true he didn't, but that's, I don't hold that against him. My dad, he comes from a funny generation of probably a combination of West of Scotland men, but also, I think, Asian men, where I honestly cannot remember my dad ever telling me I love you. And it's quite funny because I've said this to my kids, I've said it to my middle actually to my youngest thing. He was like, I've never heard, he wasn't on this, I've never heard Abu say, I love you, Dad. I've heard him say it. That's honestly my dad. I say, I love you. And my dad's response is always, thank you. So I was like,
Then do you shake hands?
no, I didn't shake hands. And then, so my youngest says, that's really sad. Whenever you say I love you to Abu, he always just says thank you.
Does that upset you?
No, I'm over it. But he loves me really, but he just doesn't see it. As long as he tells my mother, that's the most important thing. And then, so my son actually says to me, he said, Abu, it's really sad that every time my dad says I love you, you always just say thank you. And he said, are you sure about that? And he goes, yeah, I'm sure about that. And he goes, I tell you what, son, whenever you say I love you, I'll say I love you too. So the next morning, wee man's says, Abu, I love you. And my dad says, I love you too, son. And I thought, this is my chance. And so I said, Dad, I love you. And he says, thank you. And there's like, just won't change. That's just the way he is.
I'm sure he loves you.
Yeah,
your mum, you've spoken quite a lot about her as your sort of the bedrock of the whole family. She is reported as saying about you in one interview a few years ago, out of the 4 siblings, that you were the one who didn't get up to any mischief. And you used to open the door for every guest, and you used to take the bins out and help her with her shopping. I don't know what you've got to say to that. Is that a fair description of what you were like as a child?
Yes. I used to also be the one.
Are you the youngest of the 4?
I'm the youngest. Yeah, I'm the youngest of the 4. So I was probably the one that probably looked out for my mum most, in the sense of growing up. That is, I think, probably looked out for her most. I think that's partly because, to be honest with you, for large chunks of growing up, my mum was mum and dad. And that's no fault.
Because your dad was in Westminster.
Yeah. So a combination of not just that, but also before he went to Westminster. So, and again, this is not a criticism of him. I can understand why he was doing it, but he came to this country in his mid-20s. The old cliche, but it's true. He had £5 in his pocket, wanted to build a life for himself and his family. My mum came here when she was only 4 years old, but was brought up in Lossiemouth and views Lossiemouth as her home. But my dad grew up in Pakistan, came here in his 20s when he got married to my mum. And so he was motivated by, how am I going to build something so I can give my family a certain quality of life? And so he focused on that, focused on building a successful business. And then he was always political, so he was political even when he was back home in his own mother country of Pakistan. So he wanted to be in politics, he wanted to be a community representative, more broadly community representative, and he really cared about politics. So he was really driven by outcomes, really driven by achieving, and that occupied the vast majority of his time. And that meant that for lots of things, it was mum and dad, and that was hard on her. Like I remember.
Well, the death threats that you referred to before were directed at your mum.
Well, they were directed at my mum. That's right. So.
And do you remember that quite vividly?
It's like one of my earliest political memories, to be honest with you. I mean, I've told the story before, but I'm happy to share it again. Is just leaving to go to school. I think I was 11, 12, probably at the time. And there was a funny looking letter on just by our letterbox, and I picked it up and I opened it up. I don't know why, I don't know what motivated me to pick it up and open it, but I did, and it was just cut out letters from newspapers, probably the Herald, and a picture of my mum mocked up, tied to a chair with 2 guns pointed to her head, and it said, "Bang bang, it's all it takes." And that was a message from Combat 18. It was a far-right organisation at the time who were agitated and didn't want the UK to elect its first Muslim MP, and so were very vicious in terms of their attacks and threats. And then obviously my dad had controversial moments in politics, it's safe to say, but throughout all of that, my mum was absolutely a rock. And so she never, no matter how difficult anything got, she never expressed any emotion to us. She never expressed any weakness to us. She only ever kept saying, we don't give up, we keep fighting, we're not going to let them drag us down, we're not going to let them win, we stay, we fight. But then she was like that with us to our face, but you still heard the tears and the emotion when she got behind her own bedroom door in her own private space.
Okay.
And so I could see that, I could feel that, and so that's why I've always had that emotional attachment with my mum in particular. And honestly, people often think, oh, Dad was a politician, he probably gets his politics and his values from his dad. Honestly, I get it from my mum. My dad was brilliant at machine politics, but actually values what you're fighting for, standing up for what you believe in, looking out for those less fortunate, being judged on what you do, not what you say or what you own or what clothes you wear or what car you drive or what kind of house you have, was all things drummed into my head from my mum. And she's doing some amazing work now.
Does she tell you that she loves you?
She tells me she loves me all the time. Although my eldest brother's our new favourite now, but I'll get over it. But
does she hold you to account though? Is she critical if she doesn't agree with what you've done?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I won't get into specifics of that one, Catherine. That's a much harder conversations. But absolutely she is.
But you must seek that out as well.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. She's not shy in telling you what she thinks, which is good, which is great. But she's doing amazing work right now in Pakistan. So she actually splits her time between here and in Pakistan now with my dad. And so she's now set up her own charity in Pakistan. She's got 40 plus women's empowerment centres where she's training women on skills to get them into the employment market or start their own businesses. She's doing employment support in every female prison in the Punjab. She's set up a school that helps to target young girls in particular to get into education. She's just about to open her second school in Lahore, which is amazing. And she's just partnered with the World Health Organization to start a breast cancer screening program in Punjab, and doing rapid treatments for free in the most deprived communities where there are high incidences of both child mortality and maternity unit, but also cancer screening and treatment for high levels of breast cancer. Honestly, what she's doing is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. She's the best politician in our family, even though she's never stood for election.
After school, after you've carried all your mum's shopping bags and all of that, you go to university. Why dentistry?
So I either wanted to be a doctor or a dentist because I was driven. I always had a natural drive for public service. So I didn't want to go into business or family business. I always wanted to do my own thing. I was political in that I was a member of the Labour Party. I cared about Labour politics. I cared about, of course, international issues, but also issues closer to home. And so I always wanted to do something that felt like I was striving for something that was bigger than just myself or my own family unit. So I wanted to be a public servant. I wanted to either be a doctor or a dentist. I chose to become a dentist partly because one of my aunts was a GP.
I love teeth.
I love the people. So I chose to become a dentist. I went to study dentistry at Glasgow University. And then again, coming out of studying dentistry, where I chose to go and work was I very deliberately chose what is one of the most challenging postings in terms of dental health and health inequalities in the country. So I ended up as a dentist in Paisley, which at that time had the poorest oral health record of anywhere in Western Europe. So that's where I became a dentist, that's where I practiced, until politics came and grabbed me.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I want everybody to be able to ask questions. It is the Fringe. We've got 6 quick fire round questions. You have to give quick answers.
Snappy answers?
Yes, okay, and they're stupid questions because it's the
All
Fringe.
right, okay.
But you like fun things.
Yes.
You're going to be stuck on a desert island for a month. You can only bring one person. Nicola Sturgeon or John Swinney.
John Swinney.
Why?
Listen, Nicola Sturgeon and I have done local politics together for almost 20 years. I think we've spent enough time in the south side of Glasgow together. Let's not do a desert island.
Fair enough. For the dentist in you, a manual or electric toothbrush?
Manual.
Manual, huh?
Yep, manual toothbrush.
Never electric.
Never use an electric toothbrush.
Okay, well.
I just quite like the manual toothbrush.
Okay, fair enough.
Never
Who's the best dancer, you or Alex Cole Hamilton?
Definitely me.
But he thinks he's good, doesn't he?
He thinks he's brilliant at everything.
Your biggest celebrity crush?
Oh, this got me into trouble actually
You
before.
can't get into trouble again.
My biggest celebrity crush. How do you answer that without
Just
sounding?
an answer?
How do you answer that without sounding like a creep? That's the challenge. Biggest celebrity crush. Oh my goodness.
You can answer.
What am I going to answer for that
Well,
one?
right, next one's worst. Biggest crush at Hollywood?
Biggest celebrity crush. Let's go back to that one.
Well, we know it's Jackie, don't we?
I'll say Margot Robbie was my biggest celebrity crush.
Barbie.
Less Barbie, more. I'm not even going to. This is too dangerous.
Biggest
This is
crush
too
at Hollywood?
dangerous. Biggest crush at Hollywood. Oh my goodness, Neil Bibby.
Alright, okay, fair enough. And you like your clothes, you like your fashion. What's been your biggest fashion disaster?
Biggest fashion disaster. Actually, I look back at the pictures when I first became an MP, and I mean, it just looks like I'm wearing a suit jacket that's 4 sizes too. It looks like I'm wearing my dad's suit, which is utterly ridiculous. And we also used to wear really thick ties. Like the ties were this thick. So that's probably my biggest fashion
That's
disaster.
not too bad, is it? Okay, right.
Also, I did a Fringe show last year where I wore chinos and I wore a pair of trainers and I didn't wear any socks and I got absolutely slagged for not wearing socks. Is that a bad thing? It's not that bad, is it? It's not that bad.
Okay, right. We are going to get audience questions in about 5 minutes. First Ministers. You say you want to be First Minister. How much do you really, really want to be First Minister?
I'm putting my heart, soul, energy, time, everything into winning election next year. We have done a huge amount of work to change the Scottish Labour Party in the last 4 years. I think we've done things that people probably thought wasn't possible, but it's all for the purpose, and so I'm going hell for leather to win next year. I want to be First Minister.
So why do you want to win?
Because to be honest with you, I look around, two things, I look around and I see endless potential and opportunity in Scotland. And I think what difference it could make if we had a First Minister and a government in Scotland that had a can-do attitude rather than a can-do attitude around realising that potential and ambition for Scotland. And the second reason why, to be honest, and this partly goes back to the question you were asking about parenthood and the relationship with own kids, I think generational promise is currently being broken in Scotland, where I look back at my own family's history and background. So my granddad came here in the 1940s, and the hard work he did meant that the generation that followed him, so my mum and my dad, had more opportunities and better opportunities than he had. And then I look at my parents' generation, and not just my family, but the same families right across the country, and look at the hard work they did and other parents of that generation did, and the opportunities that I had, and kids my, when I was a kid, kids my age, had our opportunities were better than the ones they had. To be honest with you, I look at the next generation and I think we risk being the first generation that breaks the generational promise, where the kind of world we leave behind for our kids is more divided, more unequal, less safe, and going backwards and declining rather than moving forward. And I don't want to be the generation that breaks that, and that's partly why I want to see a change in government.
So would you be a better First Minister than John Sweeney has been right now?
I fundamentally believe that, but that's for people in Scotland first to give me the privilege of that opportunity, and then to judge me on my actions, which are the most important. Don't judge me on the words, judge me on the actions.
So how much do you think Labour are going to win by next May?
I think it's going to be a very close election. I think it will be a parliament of minorities, and that's going to require, I think, a different approach in Scottish politics, which is where I think the public probably want this to be, which is not pretending that one politician has the answer to every problem, or that one political party has the answer to every problem, but that collectively, through the talents and expertise of people across the country, we can build up the ideas to build a better Scotland.
Do you think Labour will win?
I'm absolutely confident that we'll win the election next year.
So on this stage
But
last
we know what
night,
to do, and ultimately that's up to people.
Sweeney was sitting here and he said the SNP, obviously, and that no way would you work with Reform, no way would you work with the Tories. Would you work with either of them?
No, and if you look at the way that Reform and Nigel Farage behaved in the Hamilton-Larkhall Stonehouse by-election, where tens of thousands of pounds were spent questioning whether I was a Scot, questioning my loyalty to this country, questioning my identity, I think that tells you everything you need to know about the kind of person that Nigel Farage is and the kind of party Reform is. But, and this is a really important but, we have got to learn a lesson from the other side of the Atlantic, and we've got to learn a lesson from here, is if we sound like we're saying to people who may be tempted to vote for Reform or any other divisive party that we think they're stupid or they don't understand or that they're racist or somehow somebody else knows better than they do, we're only going to push people further into the arms of people like Nigel Farage. And we've also got to understand what's driving people to want to press the most destructive button when they say they're tempted to vote Reform. And the reason why people are tempted to vote Reform or tempted to vote for any of the divisive parties is because they do not believe politics works for them, they don't believe politicians work for them, they don't think the economy works for them, they don't think our public services are working for them, and they feel everything is a man's decline. And to be honest, they've got a point. And so we've got to change that, and we've got to confront the issues that are driving people to that kind of politics if we are to defeat that kind of politics.
Okay, before we move to audience questions, who's the best First Minister Scotland's ever had?
Donald Dewar. Because Donald had to do something that I think others haven't had to do, which is he had to, first of all, win a referendum to get the Parliament. He then had to build a credibility for an institution, and he had to persuade people on devolution. And let's be honest, he didn't have to persuade just the opponents in the country, he had to persuade people in his own political party, in his own political movement. And I also think he was a person of immense stature, and also someone that believed in a politics that was bigger than himself and bigger than his own political party. He was genuinely a politician that wanted to pull people together, and to be honest, and perhaps I'll look back on this and think it was a naive view he had, given everything that's happened in the last 2 decades in particular. But I think Donald genuinely believed that once you got a parliament together of different people of different parties, we would do politics differently from how we did it in Westminster, and that we would find common ground, and that's what would drive us rather than finding difference.
He'd be disappointed at how it's changed.
Undoubtedly. I think
What do you
undoubtedly.
say?
I think he would still be a believer in devolution. I think he would still be a defender of the institution. But I think he'd feel as if the progress and story of devolution in 25 years has not lived up to the opportunity and potential that the Scottish people demanded. And it's actually a broader challenge, I think, that confronts us. I think there's a real risk that if we don't see a change of direction next year, that the debate in Scotland, and it'll suit people who want to live their life constantly in constitutional arguments mode, is I don't want a debate to shift to is devolution right or wrong, I want it to be our decisions right or wrong. Is if we shift to a position of let's just get rid of the Parliament or let's just get rid of devolution, I think that undermines the project and it undermines the opportunity to deliver for people.
What would Donald Dewar make of the talent pool in Hollywood?
I think it's safe to say that we have to change the drive, the leadership, the backstories, and also the level of engagement and intent from ministers in the Scottish Government. I too often see ministers looking like they're there to fill a space rather than to drive a department and to drive outcomes. We've got to get back to being an outcomes-driven country, not an inputs-driven country. We've got to get back to being a can-do country, not a can't-do country. And I honestly believe our people are there. I just think, to be honest, people often say, does Scotland lack ambition? Scotland doesn't lack ambition. Our people don't lack ambition. They don't lack imagination. They don't lack talent. They lack a leadership that shares that level of imagination and ambition. I want us to have a government that meets the aspirations of the people in Scotland.
Well, I would like the people in this room to be able to ask you a microphone. This lady at the front. Okay. Yeah.
We can see the lights quite late.
Thank you very much for that discussion today. I thought it was interesting also to talk about Sir John Curtis's predictions in the polls, a prediction of a minority for SNP. And I think the polls have shifted coincidentally with the winter fuel payment and the discussion about BAT. And interesting, the conversations we've had about Gaza. And I'm just wondering, how do you get that voice out about the domestic issues facing Scotland? Because even in the Herald, I don't see you as often as I'd like to see you. I get that.
I'll take up with the editor.
Yeah, so it's that kind of share of voice and core message. How do one shift the polls if you're not getting out there and being heard as you are tonight?
Great question. I can say a couple of things, and you should never fall out with John Curtis. I'll never fall out with John Curtis. But what John Curtis is doing when he's giving his analysis is he is taking a poll and he's translating a poll on any given day to what it would mean if the election was held on that day with that polling result. What he's not doing is saying this is what the outcome of the election is going to be. And the evidence of that is 6 months out, quotes, it was Labour will be lucky to win 20 seats in the general election. A year out, it was Labour will be lucky to win 14 seats in the general election. 2 years out, it was Labour will be lucky to win 8 seats in the general election. We won 37 seats in the general election. The SNP won less than 10. So they're snapshots. Secondly, I think the way electoral cycles work is people don't automatically switch from election to election in terms of how they think or how they consume their politics. So right now I think lots of people are thinking about politics in the prism of we've just had a UK general election, how do I feel post a UK general election, rather than thinking about the choice that faces them in a 9 months' time. And third, you also have to look at where votes have gone in terms of where we are in the polls and what we need to do to confront it. So how we cut through is one, there has to be better storytelling of what a UK Labour government is doing. There also has to be good decision making, but also better storytelling about positives done by a UK Labour government. I don't think they've done anywhere near enough to say how we've had record increases in wage levels, how we've got a new deal for working people, that's the upgrade to workers' rights, the biggest upgrade in a generation, how mortgages have fallen by almost £1,400 since the Labour government came to power when Liz Truss put mortgages up by over £2,000. All of these are examples that a Labour government hasn't told the story on, as well as making sure they're actually making other good decisions that benefit people here in Scotland. And then we've also got to frame the choice for what next year is. The reality is Keir Starmer is not standing to be First Minister, Nigel Farage is not standing to be First Minister, and also you aren't electing who the UK Labour government is. What people are choosing next year is who the First Minister is going to be, and they're choosing who the Scottish government is going to be. And what that means is they are choosing who's going to be responsible for running our NHS when we've got record-long NHS waiting lists. They're going to be choosing who's in charge of deciding our schools and education policy when we have Scotland falling down international league tables. They're going to be deciding what happens with our policing and our criminal justice system when far too many crimes aren't reported or aren't investigated and communities don't feel safe. And they're going to be deciding how we have a different approach to housing policy when we have a declared housing emergency and record levels of children living in temporary accommodation and homeless in our country. That's ultimately what people are voting on. And we have to demonstrate to people we have not just an identification of the problems that Scotland faces, but we have the ideas and solutions on what we're going to do to fix it. And then the third part is, which I think goes to the final point you made, is how do we get our message across where so much of the press, this is no criticism of the press, it's the reality of the press, is consumed by what's happening in the UK, the rights and wrongs of the UK Labour government, and where I think the SNP strategy for next year is just go quiet, say very little, do very little, keep out the news, keep out the story, and just hope all the attention's on somewhere else. That poses a different challenge for a challenger that's trying to take on the SNP government to get a different result. That's partly we've got to have a more compelling message that persuades people to write about it, report about it, but with all due respect to mainstream media also means looking at other platforms of communication, which is direct communication, as well as what's happening on our social media feeds and different forms of campaigning.
Okay.
And hopefully what you'll see over the course of the next 9 months is a ramping up of what the choice is next year, and that stronger illustration of what we're going to do differently. Because ultimately that's what I'm interested in. The easy bit, honestly, the easiest bit of politics is to come here and spend all our time slagging off other political parties rather than talking about what you're going to do differently. I would much rather tell you what we're going to do to fix the NHS, to improve our schools, to make you feel safer in the communities, to build more homes, and to make sure businesses can thrive here in Scotland.
You've spoken enough now. We're going to get on.
Sorry. You didn't say that had to be short.
This chap in the hat.
As a long-term working-class Labour Party member from the Paisley area,
I wasn't your dentist, was I?
no, you will. There is a family connection, my ex-wife Totty, that's another story for another day.
I'm intrigued.
There you go. Anyway, the working class feel let down with what Labour's offered them now. They're not offering enough. And again, the SNP offered them an outlet. They promised progressive politics and all the rest of it. And then they went into deals with the Green Party. Would you do a deal with the Green Party that costs us more money, that costs us more cars, that costs us more, right? And it really brings the normal working class people down. And that's what's happened with those things, right? It's just the working class people need an alternative, and Labour's not offering it just now.
Good question. First of all, on the deals point, we are going into an election to win the election, but recognising it's going to be a parliament of minorities coming out of the election, and we will look to form a minority Scottish Labour government which doesn't do deals, but actually looks to progressively work with the Parliament to get things done to make progress in our country. And I think so many of the challenges that we've seen in our country has been a government that doesn't look like it's got the right priorities, focusing on issues that perhaps matter to smaller parts of membership, whether that is the SNP membership or the Union membership, rather than what's of importance to people in the wider population. But you ask a really important question, particularly working class communities, and that's an area that, for example, Reform in particular are trying to make progress in, as well as the SNP have historically made significant progress in, particularly post the independence referendum. And
He also asked you, would you do a deal with the Greens?
Oh no, I thought I answered that.
Definitely
I thought I said
not, maybe.
no. I thought I said no in terms of we're not looking to do coalitions and deals, but what we will do is, of course, we'll have to negotiate to get budgets passed, we'll have to negotiate to get legislation passed. What dragged them down, I think, was the fact that they had no ideas of their own, and to be honest, I don't think they got an interest in governing. I think they got more interest in campaigning and view government as a campaign rather than
Definitely no deals with the Greens for the Labour Party.
Look, one thing is we are not going into an approach where we're looking to do deals with political parties. We are looking to form a minority Scottish Labour government that does no kind of backroom stitch up, but instead looks to govern based on what we promised and to try and build consensus.
Okay. Another question.
One of the working class is really
Okay,
important
yeah.
that's that is, I think part of the disconnect, particularly in Scotland, is people say what difference is a Labour government making in our lives, or what difference is a government making in our lives. If you actually look at the things that touch people every single day, they are not the responsibility of the UK Labour government. They're the responsibility of the Scottish government. So that's not to say decisions made in the UK don't impact people in Scotland, because they do, but it's different parts. So what's your most closest interactions you have? Your access to your GP, you get the treatment you need when you need it, a care package for your loved one, your kid's school, access to a college, university or apprenticeship, getting on the housing ladder and the broader impact on the housing market, feeling safe in your community and what that means in terms of local policing. Every single one of them is the responsibility of a Scottish government and not the responsibility of a UK government. And so how we can demonstrate to people why who you choose as your Scottish government matters, and what that Scottish government then chooses to do really matters if you want to make improvements in their life. That's part of the argument we have to.
We're going to run out of time. We're going to get another couple.
Sorry.
This lady here.
Hello. my questions were, how do we drive the younger generation into politics if they feel helpless? If politics has led us to this state, how do we stay optimistic?
The single biggest risk to Labour victory at the election next year is if a sense of hopelessness takes over rather than anything else. Because I think the biggest problem we've got, and this is not just with younger voters, but it's predominantly with younger voters, is I think there are so many people now that think politics doesn't work, politics can't make a difference, who you vote for doesn't make any difference, and things will never change. And that sense of hopelessness, to be honest, benefits the status quo rather than benefits those that are trying to campaign for a different direction or for change. And what we have to demonstrate to young people is that decisions matter and politics does matter. I think they are political. I think young people care about politics. I think they're more driven though by issues than by party politics, but how you make politics relevant to the issues they care about and making them feel as if and understand that decisions made can make a positive difference in their lives is also going to be really, really important.
One more question.
And that means younger voices in politics.
This guy here.
Anas Sarwar. I'm just reflecting on the first question there and the fact that the first 20 minutes here was dominated by Keir Starmer. Don't you ever consider that devolution will never work, and indeed the parties of the centre-left and indeed the centre-right will never win at Holyrood as long as they are dominated by Big Brother in London, rather than able to be separate parties allied to their London allies, picking the areas in which they agree and which they don't, but are able to focus on those very issues that you just tried to outline about what Scotland needs.
Well, part of it is we aren't dominated. I do what I want to do, how I want to do it, when I want to do it. I lead the Scottish Labour Party, I want to be First Minister, I want to lead the Scottish Government, and I want to demonstrate to people that devolution can work and make a difference in their lives. And I honestly think there's more of an obsession with the dynamics and relationship of a UK Labour Party with the Scottish Labour Party, and more of an obsession and a dynamic about UK-Scotland relationship amongst the commentariat than there is in the public. I think the public are now starting to see much more sharply that decisions made in Scotland aren't working for them. And if we can frame a choice about what the choice next year is, about electing who the First Minister, what the government is, and what direction we take in Scotland, then I think we'll have a fundamentally different approach. I don't support independence, I don't support a referendum, I believe in devolution, but if we want to defend devolution, then I think we've got to do devolution differently. Otherwise, I think that devolution itself will start to be undermined and questioned by the population.
Okay, we sadly need to draw this to a close. So, one parting thought. Fast forward to the 2026 election, you don't win. Are you staying? Are you going back to dentistry? What are you doing?
We're going to win.
If you don't win, is the question.
No, honestly,
But if you don't win, what are you going to
I was
do?
asked this question, what if you don't win the leadership election?
Well, you can answer it again because we didn't get the answer.
When we were asked, are you going to win the general election? What happens if you don't win the general election? We won. What happens when you don't win the Hamilton-Larkhall Stonehouse by-election? We won. What happens when you don't win the Scottish election? We're going to win, but that requires us to persuade the good people of Scotland to vote for us. And that's what we're going to do. It's not avoiding the question. I honestly believe that you're always better being happy warrior, making your case positively about why you want to do something differently, and that's the approach I take to politics. It's the approach I take.
Well, thank you for being a happy warrior tonight.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you, everybody. Thank you,
Thank you.